it also drew its data from a relatively large verb list, which contained 130 verbs given in context. So it's typical of some modern approaches, and probably the earliest approach of this kind belongs to Vladimir Petrovich Nedyalkov, who just started with 4 verbs at some time. But now we know these lists are expanding, and there are many similar projects which are based on word lists. Okay, so the questionnaire for this project looks like a number of verbs in context, such as Peter reached the bank, so that we know beforehand that Peter is the first argument and the bank is the second argument. The question is how these 2 arguments are expressed in individual languages. So 2 predefined arguments, which are labeled X and Y in this project, are something that we know beforehand. And the valency class of a verb is defined as the list of its arguments with their encoding properties. And as in most other studies, coding properties are understood to encompass flagging, such as cases and add positions, indexing, including agreement affixes, and sometimes word order. So the biggest problem, the biggest challenge in the cross-linguistic study of valency classes is that there is no evident a priori tertium comparationis for the exploration of these valency classes. For example, we can say that, well, in Russian, this or that verb requires an instrumental case, but instrumental case is a verb, is a language-specific device. So we can't answer a question whether other languages are similar to Russian or dissimilar to Russian in respect of using or non-using the instrumental case, because instrumental case is a language-specific device. So what's the solution to this problem? The solution is that probably we can use the very structure of lexical lists as our tertium comparationis. So let's give an example. Imagine we explore the behavior of 3 verbs, reach, touch, and attack in Eastern Armenian. We see from these examples that both reach and touch require the second argument of these verbs to be in the dative case. The fact that it's labeled dative in Armenian is probably not very informative, because, well, after all, it's just a label. For example, we also know that the dative case is also encoded, is also used sometimes to encode direct objects and so forth. So we can say, let's look for other cases that are labeled dative. But what we can do is compare these 2 verbs with, for example, attack, which is another Armenian verb, and its equivalent in Armenian requires a completely different pattern. Well, not completely different, but a slightly different pattern, which requires that the second argument be marked by the dative case in combination with a certain past position, vrau, whatever it's pronounced. So we can say for sure that Eastern Armenian belongs to a group of languages where both reach and touch belong to the same valency class, whereas attack belongs to a different class. So information of this kind is reliable, and it does not depend on conventional labels such as case labels in individual languages. So the brief history of the project is that the questionnaire was actually compiled back in 2010 at the Laboratory for the Typological Study of Languages, where we are now, kind of. So at our Institute for Linguistic Studies in St. Petersburg. And I have the names of the team members who participated in compiling this question and solving some methodological questions for this project. And from that time on, we continued compiling data for individual languages. So collection and annotation of the data continues up to now. In fact, I should mention this, that this project would have been impossible without the without the help of many supportive language experts who actually were invested a lot of their effort, a lot of their time, a lot of their knowledge into this project, because I know that it's very time consuming to collect data on your language when you are addressed by a friend or colleague, and to do it for free. Yeah, I can't express my gratitude with proper words, because these are tens of excellent linguists who really have other businesses to do, but nevertheless were somehow eager, or at least consented to share their knowledge in the form of filled questionnaires, and a large questionnaire to that. So they require a big thank you, but there are so many that I couldn't put the names, but in a very small print here on this slide. So thank you is very big, and I would have liked to present and name each of these 70 participants who contributed the data, but unfortunately I just don't have space and time for that. So many thanks, and I'm happy that some of these contributors are present here today. So that's how the sample of languages grew over the years, and I also hope that it's gonna grow a little bit further. And if you are an expert of a language which is not yet in the sample, you are very welcome to participate as well. So in 2018, we published a volume on this, based on this project in Russian, and it's only now in 2020 that thanks to Dmitry Nikolaev, this project finally grew into an online database, which will be referred to as BivalTyp. So the database for bivalent verbs and their encoding frames. And the credit for this phase goes exclusively to Mitya, who again volunteered to build the online interface. So I'll now make a pause with my presentation, and we're gonna take a brief tour of the actual database as it's available online. So that's I hope you can see that. Yes, can you? Is it all right? So we are now on the front page of the project. So, well, some very basic information here, and probably we'll start with the section devoted to the questionnaire. I don't know, can you see how I push the buttons, press the buttons? Okay, so I go yes. To the questionnaire. Actually it exists in, currently it's available in 2 versions, Russian and English. There is actually the French version as well, but it's not online yet. So the English version of the question looks like this. You've already seen that during the presentation. There are conventional labels for the predicates, such as feel pain, be afraid, throw, and so forth, and the actual sentences which you can use to collect the data. Basically, similar information is also shown on the section devoted to predicates, which is handy in that it explicitly indicates which argument is a priori considered to be the first argument or the second argument. So, for example, in the case of feel pain, the first argument is the experiencer, so such as Peter has a headache. Peter is the first argument, and head is the second argument. And for each verb, you can explore the ways the 2 arguments are encoded in the languages of the sample. So that, for example, for to be afraid of, we can see that in agul, for example, the fear, the experiencer is encoded by the dative case, whereas the thing feared or the stimulus is encoded by past elative case. So very literally, to Aslan is afraid of the dog is something to Aslan is afraid from behind the dog, or something like that. But we can also explore other argument encoding devices for other languages, and they are summarized in this left-hand part of the database entry. So the X argument is expressed by the dative case in agul. The Y argument is expressed by the post-elative case in agul. Both are non-core. That means that the locus of intransitivity. It encompasses both X and Y. And we can explore all other kinds of languages and also see the actual sentences and their interlinearizations. So actually, languages, we can also explore the data on the language by language basis. So for example, we can go to Sami and see the nice pictures of Alona and Ksusha, and also some basic information about where this language is spoken and how its clause structure is organized, and some basic information about its case system and so forth. And finally, the examples. So 130 sentences with individual verbs and the encoding frame. So for example, we can be curious whether be afraid, which belongs to the class nominative locative, is exceptional for Sami. We can subset the patterns by this feature, and we can also see that in fact there are like 9 predicates in the database which also belong to this pattern. So we can explore those. They are now here, and we can think about on a visual basis, so to say, whether there is some semantic similarity between the verbs that belong to this class. So what else? We can also explore the project in the form of language lists. For example, you can take a brief look at the sample in its current form. So you see that 85 languages of the sample are mainly located in Northern Eurasia. And unfortunately, only for green languages, for the languages indicated in green, the actual sentences are nowadays available in the database, but basic information about valency patterns is available for all languages of the sample. So more information can be seen if you go to the list view of the languages. So that's how it looks. We see the list of languages and some information about their structures. For example, Abaza is an Northwest Caucasian language, as you know, and it doesn't have the grammatical case, so 0. The overall number of verbs available for these languages 114, out of which 42 are transitive verbs and 72 are intransitive verbs, which means that the transitivity ratio is relatively low. And in fact, Abaza happens to be a very unusual language in many respects. For example, it has no less than 16 verbs with so-called X locus of intransitivity, which means that the first argument is encoded by some non-core device. This is a lot because most other languages display lower figures and so forth. You can also have some information about number of classes, entropy, and so forth. Okay, so other opportunities that you have on this database is to take a look of on the patterns as registered in this project. So here's the table where rows correspond to verb meanings, 130, and columns correspond to individual languages. Of course, there are very many of those, and this is mainly useful if you want to compare 2 specific languages. For example, Armenian and Azerbaijani. You can compare these 2 languages and see if they are similar in some respects. And you probably remember that, well, there was a weird pattern in Armenian which required encoding of the second argument with the past position vra. We can see if what these verbs are and whether they have any specific correspondence in Azerbaijani. And we actually see that all Armenian verbs that take these have the second argument encoded by this device correspond to Azerbaijani verbs that require the dative case. The reverse, however, is not true, so that we can easily see that the nominative dative class in Azerbaijani is a very productive class, so that there are very many verbs that belong to this class, and only a minority of those have correspondences in Armenian that belong to the nominative plus vra class. So we can compare pairs of languages or groups of languages or groups of related, unrelated, areally similar languages and so forth. For visual inspection, this is probably what you need. You can also explore all the data with sentences and so forth just in one huge spreadsheet where each row corresponds to a specific sentence in a specific language. It's really huge. You can select subset these data by whatever features you are interested in. And finally, you can explore some maps. For example, you can explore whether individual verbs belong to transitive classes, to the transitive class, or to some intransitive types in individual languages. So that, for example, we can take whatever meaning we are interested in, such as bite, for example, and check if bite is typically a transitive verb or non-transitive verb, and yellow dots correspond to languages where bite is expressed by an intransitive verb, and we are actually the verb where the second argument is in a non-core position. And we see that although in Western Europe and in Russia, let's say, most languages express this idea by transitive pattern. In the Caucasus and also in the Circumbaltic area, this meaning is typically expressed by verbs where the second argument is in a non-core position. So you can explore information like this on a verb by verb basis and see some areal patterns, like for example, this is look, and we see that in mostly it's transitive in Southern Europe and in the Far East and so forth. Another kind of maps which is also available here is the map targeted at those people who are interested in comparing individual predicates. So for example, we can explore the behavior of be afraid. We know from that the cognitive schemata that are responsible for assigning the arguments of be afraid to individual syntactic positions can be different in different languages. So for example, we can explore whether be afraid is syntactically similar to, for example, go out in some individual languages. And here on this map, we see that blue corresponds to those languages where be afraid of someone and go out of something belongs to different classes, and red dots correspond to languages where the two verbs fall into the same valency class. And we see that actually in Europe, in Western Europe especially, this is not a very widespread pattern, but in the Balkans and in most parts of Northern Asia, it's a very typical pattern for a verb with a meaning like be afraid of, to behave as if its second argument were the same as the source argument of the go out predicate. So you can build whatever pair of verbs you want to explore. And finally, you can download all the data available in this project for your own use if you are interested in. So they are published on Zenoda, and you can download and analyze these data if you are interested in it. So I'm afraid I don't have much time left, or actually I've run out of time already, but probably I will just very briefly present some results, so to say. Of course, this is not a real conference talk with goals and results, but probably it's not just to see the maps and check how weird these sentences are in individual languages. You can also ask substantial questions, and there is a list of potential questions you can ask and answer using a database like that. So, for example, you can check if specific verb meanings are more prone to be transitive in individual languages than others. to calculate percentages of transitivity for individual verb meanings. Here are some results, and they contradict some prior assumptions to a large extent. And you also can explore on an empirical basis the patterns of clusterization of individual verb meanings. So put together verbs that typically syntactically are similar to each other in individual languages. Here are some results here. This visualization is fully based on empirical results. So verbs that are located close to each other are verbs that typically, or at least frequently, pattern together in terms of their syntax. You can also explore language-specific patterns against a certain typological background. For example, I personally studied a certain Neo-Aramaic variety, and I had an impression that there are like two prepositions that are very similar to each other. These are ska and al, and on this visualization, this corresponds to triangles, black and white triangles. Here in the upper part of the visualization, and we can see that, well, indeed, in terms of typology, the meanings of these verbs are very similar to each other, but so it happens so that in a particular variety we were studying, these two verbs belong to, these sets of verbs are just divided between two big valency classes. We can also explore individual languages in terms of their properties. This map, for example, shows whether a specific language favors transitive patterns or intransitive patterns. And we see that Eastern Europe and the Caucasus are areas which are much less transitive than, for example, Western Europe and the Far East. And we also can explore distances between languages in terms of their valency class systems. So, for example, this is a visualization that is based on a distance metric, which somehow evaluates the degree of similarity between valency class systems in pairs of languages. And we can see that there is a lot of areal information here. For example, Basque, even though non-Indo-European, is similar to many Romanian languages and also Albanian in terms of its valency class organization. And Armenian is similar to Turkic and other Altaic type languages and so forth. So we can explore the ways in which areal and genealogical factors contribute to degrees of similarities and dissimilarities between languages, and you can employ various quantitative techniques to answer your questions. For example, here I explored whether differences between valency class systems is sensitive to areal and genealogical distance, and it appeared that valency class systems in languages that belong to the same family but fail to belong to the same genus are typically behave as if they were unrelated altogether. So this indicates that valency class systems develop very fast, and there is almost no family size effects in the data. By contrast, transitivity shows a different pattern where languages belonging to the same family, even though very remotely related to each other, still are typically closer to each other than pairs of unrelated languages, and so forth. Of course, this was just a very brief introduction to what kind of questions you can ask using this database. So thank you very much. I hope this will be useful for some of you. Any kind of criticism, comment, feedback, and language data are all very welcome. Thank you.
Thank you very much for the very impressive presentation, and we have 2 minutes for discussion. But I don't see yet any questions. Okay, Andrei, please.
Okay, thank you. What about technical possibility to enlarge the database through including new lexical meaning that are not in your original questionnaire? as well as expanding it with the transitives and other trivalent verbs. That's not about your personal research plans, but about the technical possibilities of the database.
Well, technically, it's not a big deal because, well, you just need one more line, so to say, in the database. The question is, you know, imagine we have a new verb meaning. I or someone else will have to contact all the 70 plus contributors in order to obtain the reliable data on the behavior of this new verb. So I don't think it's practically very easy, but theoretically, yes. Just the only obstacle is human factor, so to say. You have to first force me to do that, and then I have to force 70 persons individually to remember what were the principles of data annotation and provide these additional examples.
Yeah, that's clear, but that's why I have asked about the technical opportunities.
Okay, maybe Mitya can add something here, because I don't know whether there is any technical problem with this. I don't think so.
No, no, there is no technical problem. You just add a line to a table. So basically, everything you see is generated from tables. Sergey provides the tables, and I convert them to the website. So if we have another line in the predicates table, and then we have corresponding lines in the languages table, then it will just all work out. The other thing to take care of is to put in a correct number of the predicate in the language table. So it's fully automatic. As far as database is concerned, we can enlarge it indefinitely.
Okay. Any other short questions or comments? Aigul, please.
Oh, hello. Thanks a lot for this interesting talk. I was wondering, what's the procedure if someone finds out that there is variation? I mean that there are different predicates that can be like used in the same function. Like I was looking at the predicates to have flu, and in Russian you can basically say "Petя болеет гриппом" or "У Пети грипп." I was wondering, like, how to decide which one to use.
Yeah. Okay. One of the sections in the database and also in the volume published is specifically devoted to this. So how to choose. In brief, the criteria are something like naturalness, so frequency or something like that. So first exactitude of the translational equivalent. Second, naturalness. Then if there is a verb and some non-verbal expression, then the verb is to be preferred. And finally, if there are two verbs, then an intransitive variant is to be preferred over the transitive verb. But these criteria are ordered, so you start with the first one. So first of all, which is more frequent? Second of all, if there is a verb versus non-verb and so forth. But this was just a very brief answer. In fact, the instruction contains more information on this.
Thank you. But actually, you can almost, in any case, choose the verb based on frequency if that's the first.
Yeah, but for many languages, of course, it's not quite feasible. So you just address your speaker and elicit some translations, and well, you know how it happens. And frequency is probably sometimes, for many languages, it's out of question. And it must be a relative frequency, so not like which verb is more frequent generally, but which would be more frequent in context similar to the one which is actually present in the questionnaire. So something is very, very difficult to judge.